Okay, hi everyone who's watching this. This is a meeting between Thibaut and Stephen on parameter changes coming out of the Community Governance Oversight meeting on what is a parameter change, what is a parameter, and who decides. And if we go straight into a screen share. Okay. You were saying Miro. Sorry, you were saying. I said Miro because I was thinking of Miro from Treasury. You know, but it's Tiva. Okay, so you were talking about governance parameter changes, Tiva.
Yeah, and I think before we go dive into these discussions of what parameter changes we could do in governance, what could we change in the way we voting or weighting on. Maybe there is a better question what types of parameters we have, and then we give a brief description under each one.
Okay.
And yeah, the first what came up, and which isn't even considered maybe a parameter, but I think should be, is a rule of how we conduct a process, or I don't know even how to word it. Like, for example, when we are...
I mean, a rule, I think that was quite good, the rule of how to conduct a process. I mean, the rule aspect of it is quite interesting because that makes it very discreet, Tivo. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you. And then the process aspect. So I think of something. I mean, the word I've a bit discreet, you know, in that sense. So particular. Specific, you know, that kind of thing. Atom, an atom, atomistic, you know, so
I will try to come up with an example and then see if it's atomistic and does it fit to this, and because maybe it's another type of rule already when I bring up an example. And the one I wanted to use was this when VCAs are going through the assessments, what community advisors are doing, they're going through the only way they are submitting these quality control of assessments, they do it through Excel, and they have to have an Excel format which they upload to Google Form.
Right.
It is not maybe like a parameter when you go into the code, but it is a parameter in a sense. It's a function what we only have to use currently. And if we, so it's
I mean, you're starting there from the process, though, aren't you? So it's a particular process. Like, for example, you're talking about there in the CA example, using, I didn't know the particulars you just say, they have to use a particular tool, yeah? So they have to use an Excel spreadsheet. So the particular process is an Excel, I'm not sure, or a Google Sheet or something. Yeah, let's say it's Excel. Excel sheet with a particular, you know, with a described process. Yeah, that's the other thing. Does it already have to have a described process, Tiva, for it to be a parameter change? It does, doesn't it, really? Unless it's something new, unless it's something novel. Yeah, so you can have two types, presumably. So you can have maybe getting too specific here, but you know, a change to the current process parameter, or a novel, a new novel parameter, process or parameter. But like, I suppose I'm thinking something like the D-reps. Okay, that's novel. Would you say? Sorry, I just do that to contrast them. You're on mute, Tivo. You're on mute. Tivo, you're on mute.
Not true.
I don't know what you're talking about because I didn't hear you for that. So you have to repeat everything. So yeah, so we focus on the example.
Yeah, well, we kind of went in a sense. I wanted to get off this like the governance parameter change, just to because I think the complex one, and another one would be then if it like change the type, which I don't think we still have. You used to, but now we don't. For example, these when we change like when you assess the proposals by the impact, feasibility, and auditability, it used to be that impact had like more weight. So if you had like 444 on all of these, then your actual proposal was worth like 4.2 or something, because the weight of impact was like considered a more valuable parameter to have, or like or yeah. So to me, the impact itself is a parameter, what we are trying to achieve, and then it had its own weight.
Is that kind of what we want a parameter to be rather than what is a parameter? Because you're coming up with things which are taken from the proposal process in terms of, you know, feasibility and all that kind of stuff. And is that jumping the gun a little bit, moving forward a little bit?
What I was right now, I'm still trying to answer this: what type of parameter changes there are, and now.
Oh, I see.
This is not the rule of how to conduct the process parameter. This is more like I don't know, analytical parameter or like weighting.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I got you. Yeah, okay. Sorry. Yeah, okay. Well, so you put weight in terms of impact. Okay, that was impact, and I think so. That would be the consequence of changing the parameter. That's the weight, yeah. Do you agree, Tivo, or was that too? Something that has a greater weight will have a greater consequence, you know, downstream. You know, obviously something that has a lesser weight will have a lesser consequence. So that's going to feed into what a type of parameter change. So Okay. I mean, I'm thinking of okay, so let's say change to
Okay.
yeah, this is just an example. So, and I was thinking of terms from anti-fragility, okay, but also terms from types of blockchains, okay. So in you know, a decentralized blockchain has a high fault tolerance, and a centralized one is not. It's fragile and all that kind of thing. So I was just thinking, using that as an example between low impact and high impact, okay. So, and it's just generic terms, Tivo. So, you know, if we're thinking in terms of impact, then the parameter change, yes, there will be a kind of high impact parameter change, for example, to change something in, say, one of Marek's calculations of rewards, for example, to CAs. That's high impact. You know, or timings when you pay people from a wallet to, you know, from the Catalyst treasury, for example. That's high impact. Whereas low impact would be something, a change to one of our processes that is more tolerant of change.
Okay, but if I bring here another example based on auditability,
okay,
because what we want to also realize that if we have like 100% of voting power with our vote and we increase the impact, then we reduce the other parameters value based, because total is only 100%. Right now they all equally like same weight. So what would be the auditability low? What would be the cause of low auditability and high auditability, and how much we could like play there?
well, I mean that's about information, surely, you know. So I mean, auditability in the end is about what information you're providing about your change. Yeah. So if there's a low audibility, there's a couple of things that's not available. There's a lack of information, and also there's a lack of a process associated with that change. So, for example, let's say I'm going to publish a book or something, you know, and then I'm not going to tell you how I'm going to do that. I'm not going to tell you what's in the book. So there's no information. And I'm not going to tell you how I'm going to, whether that's going to be successful or not. how I'm going to track how many sales it has. I'm not telling you anything about that. So that's two things. You don't know what the book is about, and you don't know how I'm going to track the success of that book. Okay. So now if I said to you, well, this book is about this book is about Catalyst or something, you know, then you know it's what it's about, and I can say how I'm going to track the sales of this book, you know. So that tells you, so that's a higher audibility, you know. So what is that? That's yeah, how the goals are achieved. I mean, going back to problem sensing, that can be expressed as current state. What is the current state? What is the expected state, for example? Or you could put it in terms of metrics as well. So if you don't know what the current state is, the less information you have about the current state, the lower the audibility. Because you don't know, you know less about what the thing is, and you have less information to apply to the expected state. It's the other thing to do, I suppose. So, yeah, I mean, that's quite useful because that fits into, just trying to think,
okay, I think we don't have to bring another example, but always good. Jumping again with the parameter types.
Yeah. Okay.
If it's not the last one, then changeable constants. I don't know if it's a good word to use constant, because maybe that's immutable.
Yeah, go
on. But basically, start and end would be one, where you just have something, yeah, or number of community advisors who can participate, or a number of proposals we will accept. Yes, there are no parameters like that, but having like, but thinking of like these kinds of parameters, I would say these are like changeable constants, like the most common ones which you would see in code or something.
I would put something like, yeah, they are changeable contexts. I mean, just trying to think of a better way than that. I mean, they're currently fixed, aren't they? So there'll be like, you know, you'll have, what do you call that? A fixed value, which you can change, okay? So is that really, so yeah, like you say, start date and end date, you know? So that's, while it is a parameter, it's fixed, okay? And then when you change it, obviously, then you change it to a different fixed value. So I'd say change
Mutable.
Change to a fixed value or constant. Actually, constant's okay because it's like, it's what the change is. Okay, so as you say, you know, it can be, it's the datum, you know, what is being changed. Yeah. I mean that can be either a single thing or a number of things, can't it? So if you change, again, that comes back to the atomistic thing, like what is the parameter broken down into? Because you get more complex, you get simple parameters, and you get more complex parameters.
Yeah, and I guess No, not necessarily. I was thinking if the rule of how to conduct the process would be the combined version of these other types, but no, that it maybe includes even something more complicated.
I think this relates back down to here to the audibility, like the current state and the expected state. Like, for example, if you come to me or we went to IOG and we said we want to change how the voting system works, for example, that requires a lot of information on the current state, to change. And the lower the information, the less the audibility, also the higher the risk as well. So in fact, it would be disrejected if we didn't have sufficient information on how we wanted to change the voting system. IOG would say, no, go away and come back with more information, wouldn't they? So, and that's going to be where the amount of work you do and the amount required is going to be related to the complexity of the parameter change. So if you just went to IOG and say, we want to add 1 day to the VCA process, for example, that is enough. That's almost sufficient in saying that. So, because I mean, there might be some ways of how you're going to do that, but it's quite high information already. It's quite straightforward. Maybe it's useful how you're saying in terms of the audibility. Maybe we should incorporate audibility into this, like an impact. So maybe it does have, because if it has a high audibility. Something simple can have a high audibility, something complex can have a high audibility, and then also being incorporated, coming out of that is the impact. I mean, arguably, I mean, it's a bit weird actually, the distinction between impact and audibility, because I think in the proposal process, impact is related to the impact a proposal will have on the Cardano.
Yeah, I think,
but in audibility terms, impact is related to audibility. Sorry.
Yeah, just to make clear, these examples are related to proposal parameters, what you assessors give to the proposal, and not in terms of parameter change itself.
Yeah. I think the impact of a parameter change is more of an audibility issue. That's what I'm saying. Whereas the impact of a proposal is more about the impact it will have on the Cardano mission. Difference.
No, so, I think that this should be written down, because that is a next question. What is a parameter change? And I think that clearly.
Yeah. Okay.
But the way you are.
Oh yeah, because we've got what is a, sorry. Yeah. Okay. No, that's a good point.
But I don't remember how you answered it.
A parameter change is what is a parameter? What is a parameter change? Okay. I've gone blank now. Channel parameter info.
Okay, one question now would be: would a parameter change have to be a proposal in order to kind of go with the flow of like idea scale process, or like the innovation process we're having here? Or it's just the problem sensing, like you mentioned before, we go to the circle and say, hey, we need another 1 day here in this process.
Isn't that more about who decides? Because isn't that more about who decides? Because the parameter change, okay, so you've got what is a parameter, which is the kind of formal definition, and then we have what is a parameter change, and then who decides. Okay, so that's more about the governance of the change, TV. So if you say, do you remember when we were doing problem sensing, the review of problem sensing, we suggested that if you took a problem to the prioritized problems board, there may be a couple of different solutions. There may be a proposal or a challenge, okay, or there may be a decision, like, for example, we have made this decision but then there's issues downstream about that of consultation. Okay, so, and if you remember Harris's presentation on the parameter change process, if I can try and find that, I can't find it straight away, but that process is a process of consultation with the community. Yeah, so I mean, the only recent example I can think of is changes to the CA process or the CA reward process, and that there was I don't know what the process, but there was some kind of process of consultation with the CAs on that. I think that was Victor, wasn't it, who did that last year? But that's okay. That's more about who decides.
Yeah, but I'm trying to, because writing down what is a parameter change, would that include information about where the decision coming from? Because now you kind of opened up the opportunity that as specific representatives or a group of people, yeah, Catalyst, IAG changes the parameters, or it gives also the possibility for challenge setting or proposal to get community vote.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at current state, I mean, Jake, yeah, you break that down a bit more. Okay, so current state, and let's say expected state. Okay, so under those two things, you could have current process consultation, okay, for example. And then you could have, so you could change a number of things. Like, let's say in the past, IOG haven't consulted with us on a parameter change, TiVo, let's say that, okay? Mm-hmm. So there's two things there. They haven't, the current state is they've made a parameter change and they haven't consulted on it, let's say, okay? The expected state will be, they will consult the community on the parameter change, you know, so that will be a change to the process, you know, so. But in terms of what is a parameter change, yes, it's just yeah, you're right. It's a move from a current state to an expected state or a new state.
Would the change require beforehand, like you say, expected state, like basically current state of current process consultation? So are you trying to say that before the change has to happen, everybody else kind of has to know that this change is going to happen?
Well, no, I mean, all I'm saying is that under the current, yeah, you can change, and you don't just change the parameter when you change something. You may change how you change it. Do you see what I mean? So because we're in okay. So let's say parameter changes are changed in a certain way in Catalyst. Okay, and the way that they're changed, for the sake of argument, I'm not saying this is true or whatever, for the sake of argument, parameter changes are only changed by IOG, and that's not true, but and then all of a sudden, you know, we change that to consulting on a particular parameter. Okay. Mm-hmm. That in itself a parameter change. That in a way, that is a parameter change. It's not a parameter change, it's associated with it. Do you see what I mean? It's saying we're doing a parameter change, but this time we're going to consult with the community. Okay, so that way the current state is changing to a new expected change state in terms of consultation. You know, that's what I'm saying. That's all I'm saying about that. Which kind of relates up downstream to this a little bit. Again, that relates to who decides a little bit. Okay, so, but if I do that as a, oh. a process and then the parameter like that. So both these things, they will change into something else. So okay. What happened there? Okay, yeah, exactly. So you got, so you got that kind of thing. So,
okay. We did jump a bit from what is a parameter change. Did clear out, like helped us, I assume, with the types to make a difference between. So, and that makes the parameter itself more complicated too. How would we describe parameter? Or maybe that if we describe the types of parameters, maybe that was the cool idea.
I think, going back to types, I mean, I think when you say a change to a fixed value or constant, I think that is a type of parameter change, because there might be a more quantitative. I think there's a more quantitative parameter and a more qualitative parameter change, arguably, but then it starts stretching. It starts stretching the meaning of parameter. Like, is that a change? No, what I mean is that a change to catalyst processes, or is that a change to catalyst parameters, or is there a difference between catalyst parameters and catalyst processes? Do you see what I mean? You know, so like, for example, what revising the current code of conduct, that's a process, isn't it? It's not a parameter. Do you see what I mean? So, but so when does something stop being a process and become a parameter? And I suppose the other question is, I mean, another thing that occurred to me, actually, because I was thinking about it earlier on, is it about the scope of the change? I'll put that down as I before. So
I think yes.
So if they're gone.
I think it's very important, actually, what you just mentioned, like the scope of a parameter, and especially for the rule of how to conduct the process. I think it's very important that the rule how to conduct the process is up like a very, how to say, without side effects. So that it has a very clear like way to do it, and there is not like, or I don't know how to explain it. Basically, so it cannot be a combination of baskets of other rules. It has to be a specific one, else it's not a parameter, else it's a system.
No, but I'm also trying to think counterfactually, okay? Because you're talking here about changes to fixed values or constants.
I was actually talking about rule of how to conduct the process, step one.
Okay. I was thinking straight away, what was the most general thing you can say a parameter is? Okay, a parameter change is, and this is a suggestion, I'm not saying it's right, is if you're making a change that affects everyone, that's a parameter change.
I think it could be, if a change for one person, I think it's still a parameter change. For example, having banned list of VCAs. It will affect only these banned.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, I see your point. But so that's not right. There's some exceptions to that.
Or maybe these, like, it does affect everyone in a sense that everyone goes through that filter mechanism. What is the outcome? Are you banned or not? Is still the parameters, like end result.
I suppose that relates. Yeah, go on.
But if we go again to this complicated parameter rule of how conduct versus, then for that it's clear that everybody don't have to take a role of specific role, which now has a basket of rules he has to follow in order to successful. So it's not for everybody.
No, but it's more about the scope of a chain. I suppose about is also just trying to think this through, okay, because it's also about necessary processes, okay. So necessary processes and values, okay, and what does he call it? Values, yeah. So let's say in Catalyst, okay, we have necessary processes and values. Okay. Now, some of them may be general and some of them may be particular. Do you see what I mean? So if we change the scope of change, if there's yeah, okay, that's not right then. So the scope of change, just trying to think. So essentially it's a change to that. It's changed to something that is required within a catalyst, in the catalyst ecosystem, whether that is a process or a value. Yeah, okay, so, and that relates to fault tolerance and stuff like that as well. So
okay, I think it's one thing we should add here more is that the parameter has to be documented with clear goals.
Right. Isn't that about expected state?
Okay.
Yeah.
But it was like in a general saying what is a parameter, and then having that overview of that it has to be documented, or it just cannot come from nowhere. Because if you want to change it, then you need the source. I want to change this. If you don't have this, and it's like just everybody in their mind knowing about something, then it's hard to kind of change it. And so technically that would, I don't know, like, I wonder, is a community advisor guide a parameter? It's a collection of parameters then. Yeah, it's okay.
I think there, that's where we're starting to get into an interesting area, because I would say because it relates to necessity, doesn't it? If you think of the CA guide, is it necessary for someone to follow that guidance?
If you're a CA.
No, but some people, and you think of I've been thinking about the associative nature of Catalyst, the way that Catalyst is quite how to make Catalyst more fault tolerant, okay? So it means that rules are broken sometimes, yeah? So, and I was thinking of this the other way around, because a lot of people complain about this. And I was thinking, well, let's see that as a feature, not a bug, okay? And say, let's say that people don't follow all the rules, they don't read all the guidance, let's say, and they put in a proposal, and the proposal still, well, how it's assessed, it may be that just because you don't follow the guidance in the CA assessment guide doesn't mean you won't get a good assessment of your proposal, does it? Not automatically. And even if you get a poor assessment, it doesn't automatically mean it won't get voted for. You see what I'm saying? Now, people might say complain about that. I'm starting to think they shouldn't complain about that. Because why? Because we're not having a fixed deterministic process here. We're not assuming the CA guide is absolutely right. We're not assuming that the CA assessment's absolutely right. We're not assuming the voter is absolutely right. All we're saying is that it's good enough. And we want it that way so that we can have, why? So we can innovate. But I was getting off the topic a little bit, but going back to the, so something like the CA assessment, I would say, is not, my gut feeling is that it's, I think you're right, some elements of it may refer to parameters, so they might say you have to put your proposal in, let's say it's a proposer guide, not a CA guide, you have to put a proposal in by this date, otherwise you won't get it won't get assessed. That's a parameter. Okay. But that could be in a proposer guide.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, all the guides are not necessarily, or most likely are not parameters, but they are tools to describe parameters, or tools to make sense of parameters.
I see a quite a sharp distinction emerging here between a parameter and a process. So processes are surround parameters. Let's put it that way. Like a parameter is a fixed date by which a proposal must be submitted. A process is how you draft a proposal. So, I mean, arguably, you could say that some processes are, you could say that the whole process of the fixed values is a process. So you could say that. So that's a bit pedantic, but
yeah. Okay, but continuing with the example, now when the proposal starts writing a proposal, it has, okay, that's different thing, because I was thinking proposal process is in sense you just fill in the forms what's given to you, but the questions themselves are technically parameters.
They're only parameters insofar that you must fill them out. You see what I mean? So let's say you have the team section of the proposal. It is necessary, going back to necessary here, it is necessary that something's there. It's not necessarily what's there is less of a parameter, arguably. And I know you could argue this, because you could say, this is interesting actually from a proposal submission point of view, like, is it necessary in the team section of a proposal to put your team? That's an open question, maybe, because some proposers might argue, well, I don't have a team, or I'm anonymous, for example, which people have argued, and it might be a valid argument, So the parameter is just the necessity to put something there, unless there is some necessity added to the process. So, and that could go, you're right, Tivo, that could go in the proposal guide or the CA guide. So it could say in that section, the person must put the name of someone in their team, for example. That's a parameter.
Okay. Another thing, I've colored scope of change purple one, because now I kind of lost. Was it related to what is a parameter change? or it's still related to what is a parameter, and then I think we need a better explanation because
yeah. I mean, the scope of change, I suppose I was thinking more of impact there. Like so maybe it's more related to impact, because necessity is not related necessarily to impact. I said, well, it's not. You're going to have necessity. You can have necessary things which are going to have a lower impact than have a higher impact. That kind of thing. Okay, so just
but that. Okay, so do you want to scope of the change between like the low and high impact, or if you take if you take the weight as an impact, or the scope of change would I don't know.
I mean, it's more the amount of things it's going to be. It's literally. I mean, the scope is above that in a sense, because it's like because the scope of the change relates to what is being changed. So it's about the information related to that. And it's everything underneath that. So what is being changed is like the current state and the expected state. But under current state and expected state, you're going to have everything that's associated with that. So the current state, what is necessary, for example. So I would still think it's a top level up here, yeah. So what is necessary, what is, I mean, maybe you can have a continuum where, because going back to the team example, that seems to be a bit in between, doesn't it? Because
okay, this a lot relates with the must be documented statement.
Yeah. So
then, like,
I don't know, because you got it's also about ownership thing enough, and just put that down actually, because it's just occurred to me I'll put it over here for the moment because I'm not sure where it goes, but
maybe the ownership will maybe that's like who decides, but I'm not sure what parameters could anybody just change.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, let's take the CA guide. Okay, so, and I was going back to the team example again. Okay, let's say we have a proposal form, you have a team section. Now the parameter is it's necessary to put something in that section. Agreed? That's a parameter. What information you put in there is starting to not become a parameter. It's starting to become guidance. Okay. Who owns the guidance? CAs. That's what I'm saying. So who decides? And also who decides? Who assesses that? Who assesses that? CAs or VCAs. So that's what I'm talking about here. So now if it's a parameter, you could say, well, the CA shouldn't decide a parameter. Maybe, I'm not sure. Oh, should they? That's another question. Yeah, it's an open question, but it's about ownership as well. Ultimately, who changes a parameter, an actual parameter? If it's a necessary value, like if it's a change to the idea scale form, the person the entity that owns that is IOG. So that person.
Okay.
You're right. It does relate to who decides. So that's over here. So yeah. So let's put that there. I suppose what I was thinking, it relates to scope. It's kind of as an interrelationship between who decides and what is a parameter.
So you would, in expected state or in a current state, you would include in who decides or who is the owner.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily jump to who decides, but I would say at the stage of the information gathering, just who owns it. Yeah. So that's because that's neutral, because you're not saying who's deciding. I mean, you could argue that it implies that, but the current state is
maybe that's not good. Who owns the change would be a bit like too centralized in meaning.
But that's a situation we do find ourselves in TiVo, where we're moving from a centralized system to a decentralized system. So we're finding instances of centralized ownership, aren't we? Typically IOG.
Yeah.
And then
because
yeah. But in the future, we'll get to, well, it depends on how we work it out. I think, who do you pass the ownership onto? Now, you couldn't say in vague terms the community, but that's not a good enough answer, because particularly if it's technical, let's think of the difference between a permissioned and a permissionless blockchain. Okay, a permissioned blockchain is owned by the person who has given the permission. So it's like an intranet, it's like a locked blockchain, centralized. Yeah. If you want to make it permissionless, then the ownership is nobody's. You know, it's become a feature of the blockchain that anyone can use it. You know, so, and that's the answer. That's that could even go from a current state to an expected state. You know, so. I think there's something to be said here for parameters. I mean, I'm not sure if you can say the same thing for processes. Because the moment we have a set of centralized parameters, okay, don't we? And we're having to go to, and when IOG changed a parameter, in the past, they just did that themselves, okay? Now they're consulting the community, so it's like a transitionary period, maybe. I'm not sure. Am I getting off topic here a bit? So, yeah, it is who controls.
I was trying to capture what you just said in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, it has implications for, because I've been thinking about processes recently as well, like the complaints procedure, let's say. Okay, so who decides that? Who decides the complaints procedure? You know, who owns that? And it's not the same as a parameter. There is the IP aspect of it, yeah. So there's going to be an open source aspect of this as well. Just put that there, open source implications. So let's say, if you think of the DCF in part from the current state is proprietary code, which is owned by a centralized entity, IOG, in its IP, and they want to do a parameter change where they open source the code to move towards it. Why? Because if open source the code, it's known that the IP is owned by everyone. So it's a move towards, it supports decentralization.
But would that be okay? That would be another.
I mean, open source impact and implications is also related to documentation and things like that. But I'm just trying to remind people all the time that open source isn't just about documentation. It's about decentralization. It's about making decentralization possible. You know,
but who decides in open source?
it's the same. It's a bit like arguing who decides in a permissionless system. Everybody and nobody. That's the whole point of open source. Nobody just, well, people do decide. It's not true. You know, so you can decide to fork an open source repository.
But
that's not. It's not the issue. It's not. There's no. It's not depending on the license, because it can vary on the open source license. But there is a kind of a parallel between open source and permissionless. They're not exactly the same. I agree. They're not exactly the same, but there is a kind of they complement each other. Let's put it that way. And if you look at definitions on generic definitions of blockchain technologies, you'll see under, like any blockchain, you'll say a definition of a permissionless blockchain is often includes open source. So it means like Bitcoin or something like that, because it means that people can, there's full transparency. So, because it's one of the implications of permissionless, you know, because if you can't see the source, you require permission to see the source. Do you get what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's come back to parameters, like, so who decides, who owns the parameter? If the parameter has a closed source, or you can't access the change to the parameter yourself, it's permissioned, isn't it? So maybe permission comes into this. So at the moment, we have a permissioned parameter system. A permissioned, which is owned by IOG or their partners. To request a parameter change, we have to go through the owners, you know, that kind of thing. Where we want to go is, but this is like more of a broader aim, TiVo. It's not, where we want to go is so that parameters are permissionless, but there's going to be a transitionary phase, isn't there?
I've tried to, stakeholders would invest it with time and stake, and that would, and what they have opportunities to, for the open source impact and implications.
Yeah, in terms, I
mean, it doesn't still say how he decides, but they somehow do.
Yeah.
Right now we're doing it with vote mostly.
I mean, yeah. We're starting to get into the problem of the deterministic problem. Like, if the blockchain is just about transactions, and that can be quite deterministic, you don't need, it can be completely permissionless. You don't need human intervention. But where you need human intervention, there is the issue of permissioned and permissionless becomes difficult. My view actually is any human intervention requires a degree of permission. But that's something else. So what I'm saying is that if there's a parameter change to governance, for example, that cannot be permissionless completely. That's what I'm saying.
Would require what mission?
It cannot be permissionless. A change to governance, okay, to human governance, cannot be completely permissionless. Is what I'm saying.
But you said something about mission too, like.
No. It wasn't. No, I
said, if a human is involved, then it has to adhere to mission or something.
If a human is involved, there's permission. I mean, permission, yeah, not mission, yeah. But this relates back to, coming back to here, to the necessity and of the process and the value. Like if it's a formal system, you know, I don't know, this is up for debate because not everyone agrees with that point either. So
maybe that not should, but they could.
I suppose what I'm thinking about that, if you've got a parameter change and you're talking, the reason why I mentioned that is because I picked up on stakeholders. Okay. Now, what are stakeholders? They are humans. Yeah. and they're not robots. Okay. So if you are required to consult with stakeholders, humans, then you automatically require permission. Explain to me, otherwise explain to me how that can be permissionless. I haven't seen an explanation how that can be permissionless.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it is, because even if it's permissionless system, in first to get access to the permissionless system, you have to get permission. So this is
so it's just it's a bit of a footnote, because it comes back to who decides, because there's also the other question of I don't know, but we'll get into the kind of subject of permissions and permissionless, so maybe we should, because I don't want to get into, I just don't want to get sidetracked. So maybe we just move on to another subject, because it's.
I did move the ownership and scope under the if decision process is defined for the parameter, because I will get to the point where I think we want to set some goal. Where do we want these parameters to be? And I know it might get very complex, but if you do it in blockchain, I have high hopes that if every parameter has its own ownership and scope, everything is clear, then we don't have to worry too much about the stakeholders and who controls the intellectual property, because all the parameters are now set through the rules by how they were made up, and every new thing would require ownership, scope, and this explanation and the process how it would be changed to.
I mean, you can mitigate the human element through things like voting, for example. So let's say you have so I'm just picking up what you just saying. You have a particular, it can get quite complex, you're right. So let's have a specific parameter now the ownership could be temporary as well. That's the other thing. So just trying to think. So you could have temporary ownership. That can be a parameter in itself.
I think our next workshop is now create a template for parameter.
No, why do you have any? Because let's say we're moving towards a system, as you say, that you just described, where you have sets of parameters, and you have maybe like a kind of DAO system. Do you see what I mean? So you have this could be one of hundreds of parameters, and then this could be like a DREP, okay, who would own this, and they may own it for a certain period of time, as long as it, and then that you would vote, then that would be change voted, and then so you have these elements here. So that could be e.g. rep. And that would be the That could be opened up completely, as we have in our current proposal system.
Okay, so one example, allocate 1% of fund to veteran community advisor. It's a specific parameter, is the 1%.
So let's imagine we had a system like a DREP system, wouldn't call, maybe it's not even called a DREP system, where that could even be voted on. Actually, you could actually vote on what, and this happens in other DAOs and blockchains, doesn't it? You know, like Polkadot, where they actually vote on what they want to change.
Temporary ownership to facilitate.
Yeah, change, yeah.
But
well, it may not even be necessary. That, I mean, it's kind of depends on how you're designing the system.
But in terms of that example, who would be that be?
Well, again, it's like that's why I use the DREP example, because the DREP is a temporary position of domain knowledge. Okay. The reason why is because it's a bit like again going back to the technical aspects of the parameter. Okay, the technical aspects require some level of expertise, or not even just technical, actually, just any domain of knowledge will require knowledge in that domain. Obviously, it does require someone who knows about that, so that they can document the parameter, they can understand what's being changed, the current state and the future state, that kind of thing, the expected state. They can understand the auditability issues and the impact and everything, and scope. So that's who. It's not like owning it in terms of ownership. It's temporary ownership of domain knowledge, I suppose. Is so that's more like a DREP. I mean, we could tweak that. I don't want to get too, I mean, you could have a system. I can't really see how it could be done, because I suppose you could have a system where you just have people vote for parameter changes. They go into a kind of bounty system, if you like, and then it's completely open. But I'm not quite. There's always the aspect of what is going to be changed, and who knows what the change is. I suppose this is quite interesting issues because it relates more to
Okay. That I'm going to read.
Yeah, just go away. Specific. Yeah, I mean, it could be also. The ownership could be collective as well, Tivo. So it could be like a working group. So, but I suppose that's implicit in that. Yeah. So the vote could be also a group, or it could be everyone. Is that what you had in mind, or did you want to?
No, that's pretty good.
So who got necessary?
Okay, I think we asked and answered 3 questions in 1 hour. So
we haven't. I think I see some gaps here, but it's not bad, I suppose.
What is your question? What we are missing here?
it's more about this, what is a parameter? It's like, I don't think we've completely resolved that between, there seems to be a continuum between, like, is changing the CA guide a parameter kind of thing? You know, it's like, well, I don't think we've completely resolved that.
Understood that it's not.
It's not, but there still seems to, yeah, I agree. Okay. Yeah. I mean, we can summarize. What I can do, I can take some of this Miro board and summarize it and see what we have. And then we can see whether we need to revisit it.
Okay.
Okay. I'll document it in the community governance server science stuff. But, and then you can do, if you want to incorporate this within what else you're doing, because you referred to another board, didn't you? But is this relevant to something else you're doing, Chiba?
Yeah, I think yeah, well, it could already be used in a sense to have like an understanding of parameter, but before that could be used. And what I had in mind, if I don't know how lucky you are, but if you give me option to share screen, then again.
Yeah. Shall we close off this recording now or is this relevant?
I don't know.
Okay.
But basically, if we would take now a parameter change that we want to change, I don't know, these yellow ones are stages. So let's take the first good easy example, that proposal refinement always happens after proposal draft submission. But now we want to include that usually community advisors starting from proposal assessments, but now incentivizing them to start commenting on proposal refinement, and every comment they do is incentivized by some ticket. And you know, there is several things happen here. One was that we unlock the date and time for the proposal assessor to get like an assessment account in a sense. Yeah. And another one is that now somewhere the funds have to be allocated from, most likely from Treasury. Is it now more from Treasury, or we use the same 1% or like 3% or 4%? I don't remember how much it was, and we just split them to more stages. So now if we come like after, now right now this is like the idea of like where these parameters come from, and whatever these ideas I dropped now would like a template where you just fill out a current state, expected state, and owner. I guess these are currently the three things I understood that you need.
Yeah, although owner, yeah, at the moment we have to have owner. Yeah, you're right. There are kind of wrapping on that, like, and I'm thinking of the problem rubric a little bit. Let's say you want to do a parameter change. That what we've just described there is the technical details required for the parameter change. They're not the rationale. Like, why is this parameter change important to the mission of Catalyst?
Mm-hmm.
That's the big question, and that's the question that, like, yeah, I want to change the CA rewards. Okay, so what we've just described is the technical details, but then there's the value proposition, if you want to put it that way. You know, how is this going to benefit the mission of Cardano or Catalyst, ultimately Cardano?
I think this is also important in what is a parameter.
Yeah,
so
I would actually make a specific. I would make a specific reference to the mission of Cardano, because for example, I mean, again, that raises interesting issues, because who decides the mission of Cardano? You know, but for the moment we have a mission, don't we? You know, so, and included in that mission, for example, is the strategic open source thing, you know, that kind of thing. So at the moment we have to say that is a necessary consideration, something that we have to think about when we change a parameter is, how does this benefit the mission of Cardano? You know, how, yeah, and everything associated with that. If it doesn't, we shouldn't do it. Obviously. That's also related to current state and expected state a little bit, maybe. I mean, maybe you want to keep current state and expected state as kind of the technical aspects, so it's clear what they are. But so you say the current state, it's this is who owns it, this is how it works. That's really important. This is how it works. That's the domain knowledge. The expected state, I suppose, has an implication related to the expected state. No, let's keep it functional. Yeah. And there is, I think there's, then there's things like metrics, but that's more downstream, isn't it, Tivo? Would you say?
Would you put the like a KPI or any
yeah, but I think that's kind of downstream. It's just like how we're going to measure. We've changed the parameter. How we're going to measure that it's worked, I suppose. That's the thing. But that's more detail, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, it is necessary because it informs changes, because in an iterative process, you have to compare. After the change has been made, you have to compare the change to the original state and to see whether that's fulfilled the objective of the change.
Mm-hmm. I already visualized that we're gonna have challenge settings, parameter proposals, and proposals.
Yeah, it's a bit like what the challenge teams are supposed to do, aren't they? They're supposed to liaise with the proposers to find out how effective the challenge has been. That's really one of their objectives, isn't it? So it's like a similar sort of thing would have to be done for a parameter change, and that might be some sort of DREP or something, or whoever owns it, or whoever owns the monitoring of it would have to. It's also what oversight is doing a little bit, actually, because we actually own that problem. We own the problem of oversight. And it's what we're doing now, actually. It's kind of like we're looking at this and we're saying, how effective is this?
So far, changing any parameter is very confusing.
I don't know, it's not that bad. I think it's kind of, I mean,
what is a parameter is something what most communities complaining about, and the change is when we finally realize, oh, it was changed.
Right. I mean, maybe we should because we just discussed this between ourselves. We probably should do some surveys or not just surveys, but going out to speak to people. What are you hearing then, Tivo? You're hearing, why don't people know what a parameter is? We need to ask people that, really. So, because that's more about communication, isn't it, as well? And I mean, to me, it seems relatively clear what a parameter is, I think there's a continuum, as we said, from a parameter to a process, but I think we have to understand what people think.
Any gaps you see here? More questions?
No, I think that's quite good, because as long as we're assuming the parameter change is quite technical, that's okay. If the parameter change is not technical, then it's not okay. But when I think we haven't got there because we need to go back, as we said to our, we just said before, and well, what is that? What is that kind of change? I don't think we have that. But for a technical change, you just need current state, expected state, and the mission question. You need the mission question overriding everything. So why, how, what, I suppose, maybe.
What, I guess, what would include the current and expected state?
Yeah. I mean, why is the mission, I suppose?
The mission?
How this benefits the Cardano mission, the mission of Cardano. That's the big question. Okay. So yeah.
Would it be Project Catalyst mission? No, it's Cardano.
It's Cardano. It's Cardano. Ultimately, it's Cardano. Yeah. So,
Oh, but yeah, okay.
yeah, it is. It is. I think.
I was thinking like maybe if a challenge setting would propose it's like you are aligning with the challenge setting mission, but right now we are still. Yeah, this is complicated because they are all parameters in Project Catalyst, but Project Catalyst the test bed for Cardano. So
yeah, but it's like breaking. I see it as like breaking it down. I think I see it quite. The change is in Catalyst, you know. So, I mean, that's supposed to be the other thing. I mean, this is parameters. I mean, obviously, we're assuming everything we're discussing here is a parameter change in Catalyst, obviously, you know. So, not Cardano. That's done elsewhere. But any change that we make to parameters in Catalyst benefits the Cardano mission. You know, so I mean, downstream, because I suppose the big reason for that is because things leave Catalyst, you know, so, you know, people might get funded. It's an innovation fund, so people might get funded here and all that, but they go off and work in the Cardano ecosystem, don't they? So it's not just about Catalyst.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'll stop recording there, shall we?
All right.
Okay, well, thanks for everyone who watched this.